Welcome, friends, to Tanked Up, the podcast about video games and beer. I'm one of your hosts, Ben. It's episode 307. I'm here with Aadil.
Hey!
Hey, I said I was going to get a bit of paper to write down all of my notes, and I've not done it.
Well, my phone vibrated, which means I'm somewhere in the room, which means I don't think I put it in airplane mode, but also I don't know where I put it.
Which means
so we're both smashing the start of this.
We've started it excellently. If you're new to Tanked Up, this isn't how we always start our shows. Normally it's a little bit more organised. But it's just the two of us. This week, Lucy is unfortunately busy for the evening, so she's not joining us this week. But, as we do, every episode, we shall open some beers and discuss them before we launch into talking about video games. Aadil, what beer do you have for episode 307?
I've got the Northern Monk Blackdoor Project's Canada series OFSO 61. That's the collab with Third Moon Brewery, I believe. Although I don't see that on this one.
No, I think that one isn't a collab.
Yeah, so last week we did last two episodes we did the other OFS 6.2 and 6.3.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Beavertail Pale Cinnamon Apple Pastry Pale Ale, 5.5%, and its hops and adjuncts are Calypso, Apple, and Cinnamon, and it has PEI, Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, and Ontario checked in boxes. Oh, and New Brunswick and Alberta, and the Yukon, but it doesn't have Northwest Territories, Nunavut, British Columbia, Manitoba, Newfoundland, or Quebec in. So it's got all the provinces and territories in like little check boxes on the tin, and then it's just like, nah, fuck all you. Only some of these. I have no idea what it means. Maybe they think that there aren't beavers in the other places,
but
for the beaver tail.
Potentially.
Anyway, that is indeed what I have.
Perfect. Nice. I try and remember my thoughts on that beer, which I drank a couple of weeks ago. We'll see if they appear as you're drinking it. I am going to drink a beer from Verdant. It is the Dunkel that they've put out, a Munich Dunkel. In fact, it's 5%. It's a Munich lager, dark lager, a luxurious malt-driven beer, traditional to the Munich region. They have got Styrian Goldings of the hop in both the hot and the cold side. I think that's pretty much it. And it's got barley. That's the only allergen that's in this. So I guess they've got barley malts rather than wheat or oats or kind of anything else in this. But it's a shame they haven't said what the malts are, considering it's a Dunkel. And it's kind of about the malts a little bit more than anything. But we'll get this opened and see how it is. I've had a little bit of a craving for kind of darker beers. Not necessarily kind of like bitters and stuff like that. Although I have had a few of those over the last kind of couple of weeks. But yeah, when I saw this in the shop, I'm like, yes, absolutely. A dark beer. Perfect. Done.
Cool.
So I get this poured and we'll come back to you. For Northern Monk. What was the beer called? Beavertail?
Beavertail Pale? Yeah, Beavertail Pale Cinnamon Apple Pastry Pale Ale. You can look at it. It is very hazy. Not much light going through it, but it does sort of, it's not like solid. But I would say like slightly more orange than straw.
Yeah.
Poured with very little head. But I got like immediately apple cinnamon off the nose, even on the pour, like a Christmas apple cider you get at like a coffee shop where they've got the cinnamon stick in it.
Yep.
So and then closer up, there's that cinnamon definitely is edging it out. Again, not like it's a light nose. It's just very apple cinnamony. So it's not like I'm like getting hit from here, being like, oh god, it's all cinnamon all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember a very similar reaction to the nose. Potentially a very similar reaction to the flavour as well.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about how beers often smell different than they taste, and The initial taste of this beer is that nose that, again, isn't in your face. It's still all cinnamon and a touch of apple, which is not what I seek out in beers.
Mm-hmm.
I've only had a small sip. I'm left with this really stark bitterness at the end, and it's getting edged by that cinnamon to make it feel like it's not a beer bitter finish. This is very Okay, so in the middle there's a sweetness that's coming off of the beer.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice, a little bit rounder, but there's just too much cinnamon. I'm sorry. Like I can't get past it. Maybe by the end I'll get used to it, but I don't. The fact that it's like foretaste, ooh, that's too much cinnamon, and then there's this like this moment of like, it's going away. But as soon as you like the strength of the beer taste leaves, which again for me so far has been like a half second or a second, the cinnamon takes over again. It's like if you think of the cinnamon as like a bar, and where our taste curve is peaking above it and then dropping below it, like just. But the cinnamon is just this constant high bar, and
Mm-hmm.
everything has to pass in order to really be detected. And again, it is an apple cinnamon, so it's not just like the burning of a cinnamon, but it is much more cinnamon than apple. Um, I don't know if I've ever had a Northern Monk that's whiffed this badly for me, to be honest. Um, if at the end of this I change my mind, or even if it's not just less this, at the end of the episode I'll say something. But I mean, I'll drink it for science. But this is one of those beers that I probably wouldn't finish unless I was hard up for a beer. Like I'm not like never that hard up. This is really doing nothing for me. But I am curious with at least a half pint in me over like 10-15 minutes, half an hour, whether it'll grow on me.
Yep. Yeah.
But apparently I would say that that Northern Monk needs to maybe have pulled on Third Moon Brewing for this one as well, because I really liked the other two. I thought in that collaboration, and this is good on you for keeping a straight face and not saying anything about your experience.
I mean, it's as you said. I mean, you've already kind of mentioned the idea that maybe you wouldn't finish it, and I didn't when I had this beer. Again, it was just kind of an evening, like, I'll try this first, this beer, see kind of what the level of this box is kind of going to be. I think it's the first number. I think the other two were 62 and 63.
6, 1, 2, 3, yeah.
I thought, okay, cool. They're opening up with this one, maybe because it's the lower in percentage. I don't know why they have their numbering convention as they do, but it kind of leads you to believe, okay, this is going to lead me into the beers and show me kind of the quality and what's going on. And I had clocked when I opened that one that it wasn't a collaboration as the other two were, and I guess maybe time constraints and things like that meant that they needed a third beer for the box, and they wanted to put out 3, so decided just to throw another one together with maybe discussions they'd had and things, but very, very similar to what you've said. Very weak in the apple sort of sense. It's like incredibly weak apple juice with that someone's almost chucked in a pan to boil up a little bit and kind of make a hot cocktail. They're going to throw some rum or some whiskey in there or something like that. Maybe put in a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of nutmeg, something like that.
I'm eyeing the bottle of rye that I brought back from Canada. I'm like, I'm not adding rye to my disappointing beer.
Yes, and all they've done is they've overboiled the apple juice. They've put in far too much cinnamon, and they just didn't bother putting in any of the liquor. That's kind of how I felt about it. So yeah, matching you on that one. Shall I move on to the Verdant?
Yeah.
To the Dunkel. Obviously, it's a dark beer, a little browner in person than it comes across on the camera. I don't know if we can probably.
Yeah, I can kind of see as the light goes up. I'm pointing at my own screen, but I can't remember how we're at it. Yeah, you can kind of see at the bottom when you're holding it to the light.
Yes,
you can see at the very bottom. You can see that brown sort of. It's definitely darker than cola, but it's definitely a brown, not
absolutely
black.
And it's got a lovely, lovely sweet nose. A little bit of a roasted note on there as well. Poured quite frothy, quite carbonated. The head's dissipated really quickly, but nice little brown tinge to the head as well. And it's not that carbonated. That's actually a lot flatter than I was expecting from sort of the fresh nose that it kind of gives off. That's very nice, but it kind of hits you with all of the flavour up front. Not to match with your thoughts too much, but yeah, all of the flavour is kind of up front. So
hopefully it's better taste to your taste.
Well, there's a little bit of that sweetness that you get in the nose there, but not a huge amount. There's kind of much more deeper flavours going on than just a sweetness. There's maybe a little bit of, not blueberry, but some kind of deeper berry note going on in there as well. Maybe like lingonberry or something like that. Something a little bit different, that's a little bit deeper and a little bit not so sweet in the flavour. But it does lead to a bit of a bitterness on the back end as well. Not a massive amount, but a little bit. And it's got that kind of mouthfeel to it that it's almost like a beer that's been out a little bit too long. You've cracked it, it was super carbonated, you poured it, and then you've come back to it kind of half an hour later and it's lost all of that carbonation. Like there is something just there. There is that little hint of carbonation pushing that touch of sweetness at the front. That all goes really quickly and then leaves you with this kind of slightly, not even dank, not bitter berry flavour, but something that's just a little bit sort of like, okay. It's hard to describe, but it does have that almost cheap Coke flavour to it in its sweetness. Not quite sort of aspartame-y, but just a little bit kind of flat, almost.
Interesting.
But it does, as I say, leads in from that kind of more, it is kind of like a danker berry sort of flavour, but leads into just a light, very light bitterness on the finish, which it does try and lift that sweetness that little bit again towards the finish, but that kind of goes and then just goes away very, very swiftly. It just kind of leaves, as I say, with this little bit of a bitterness. When was this brewed? This was brewed 20 days ago. So it's pretty fresh. It goes out of date in November. So they give 9 months on the beer. But it's kind of, I suppose, expected for a darker lager. Something that isn't quite as crisp and clean, that has that little bit more depth to it. It just feels quite light. It doesn't feel quite punchy enough. There's lots of lagers where you have like a Helles or something, which, okay, that's lighter and you can get that crispness from it, but has a lovely dank kind of flavour to it. And a lot of them that have that little sort of like weediness as well. And
some of them also trade off of their carbonation to help bring out the lighter flavors, because literally like the bubbles help aspirate the flavor out. I don't know if that's the right term, but you know what I mean. And so that's why. So I'm kind of surprised that it sort of is flat, because you'd think you would be aiming for that, right? Especially on a dark lager, on something that has sort of a lighter taste profile to just help boost it, but also because that's more in line with the style, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just gonna try and Google the brewery. I can't remember the name. It's something like Zubrot or something. They got like a jester on the front of their bottles. I can't remember how they spell it, how they pronounce it, it's even thingy, but it's something around that. And I always remember Dunkel from them, which was it feels like it was very similar to this, but again, just a bit fuller. Like fuller in terms of, the mouthfeel, fuller in terms of the power of that flavour as well pushing through. And that had that extra hint of carbonation as well. And that's kind of the standard I think I've set my sort of Dunkels to almost. It doesn't quite get there. I would imagine that would have been a little bit bigger on the ABV as well.
What was this one again?
So I'm sure the brewery is called something like Zubrot or something around there. Probably like 2 words. I think they're maybe Belgian. They've got this like jester, goblin-y kind of character on the front of the bottles. I seem to remember. This was a while back. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. I think I might have drunk one on the podcast as well, because I got gifted like a 4-pack. I think. Don't know whether that one was the Dunkel that I was given. But yeah, people could find it. It'll be somewhere. Without me remembering what the name is, it's very hard to even Google it to see. But yeah, there have been other Dunkels that have been doing a little bit more than this one is doing. But I'll get through it and I'll drink it and see how we feel when we round out the hour today.
Yeah.
So we shall launch into games, drink these. We'll try and enjoy them as best we can, absolutely, as we do with every single beer. And we will chat about what we've been playing. I thought I'd jump in straight away with
go for it.
Some kind of extended thoughts on Dying Light 2. I sort of mentioned last week, I think, that I'd started it, that I've been playing, and only a couple of hours in. At the moment, I've hit about 24 hours, which seems like a lot of hours in one game. 23.9 hours I've hit. And I think my biggest problem with Dying... I'm going to start straight out with it. My biggest problem with Dying Light 2 is I don't feel like I've achieved anything. In all of that time that I've been playing, I feel like I've done very little. As the new kind of character, Aiden, you get to Villador, which is, I think, from the kind of opening scroll, one of the last cities that is standing, that hasn't been taken over by, the zombies. It's where the GRE, which is this corporation or like government agency, I can't remember what they are, from the first game, they went to Villador, opened up a load of testing centres, tried to get control of the virus, and then kind of fell. And this is set, I think, 15 years after that. I think it's set in around about 2036, because I think it suggested that 2021 was when the outbreak happened in the Dying Light universe, for everyone to become zombies, essentially. And you're kind of dragged into this conflict between sort of the survivors, the residents of the city, and what they call the PKs, which are this like law enforcement type agency, and they're trying to save everyone from the zombies, but also to be a bit more authoritarian in terms of controlling resources and things, and the survivors don't want that. They want more freedom and these kinds of things. And you're kind of thrust into the middle of this conflict, as not even just sort of like, oh, hey, you're outside and you're impartial, help us, do this. It's kind of like, oh, hey, you're outside, you're impartial, but you also run really fast, and you seem to be really good at fighting zombies. Can you plant these bombs on the opposite side's kind of water supply or windmill, so we can just destroy them, and then we can be free of the yoke of the PKs? I'm like, okay, what decision? And it feels like this is built up because I've made a decision at some point as to whether to go ahead and say earlier, oh yeah, okay, I'll listen to what you want to do, rather than reporting them back to the PKs. And there's lots of decisions in this which, again, I'm unsure what the impact is, but it feels like there is an impact at least. So again, I feel like.
But at no point did you feel like you explicitly said, I'm going to be on this side?
Yeah, but very much. It's been framed in a way where they've said, just give us a bit more time. Let's explain our plan to you. And I'm like, cool, explain, fine. just explain the plan to me. I've not made a decision, but I think that was the decision, because I haven't, from the memory of the last sort of, I suppose this might have come about hour, I don't know, 10 or 12 or something like that, maybe halfway through what I've been playing. At no point do I feel there's been another decision which has had that kind of ramification, working for one side versus the other. There have been smaller decisions which have kind of affected some characters and things, but nothing on that sort of scale, at least. And whilst I've made these moves, or the game has suggested to me to kind of make these moves, I still don't feel like I've done very much.
Right.
And I wonder if part of it is because it's such a big game. There was the whole idea that this game would take you like 500 hours to 100%. And I can absolutely see that. I can see that with everything that's going on, kind of not necessarily randomly as you're traversing through the city, but there's lots of pre-generated points, question marks, as you get with every open world game. I know lots of people have been discussing Horizon and the use of kind of question marks on the map, not getting very much back from them. This is very kind of similar, except it's sort of half and half with the stuff that's kind of presented to you. Some of it's like, oh, hey, here's somewhere you could raid and get some, crafting materials. Or it might be someone that gives you a random side quest for you to be able to do.
But they appear sort of the same on the map? Or...
So they do until you get within a certain radius of them, and then suddenly it will kind of like pop and say, oh, this is what this is. The people who give you quests, you don't get quite as close to them, and they'll say that. But some of them you were almost on top of before they tell you what it is that you can kind of do there.
Is there an in-game lore reasoning for your map having icons and all this information?
No, you've got no kind of HUD as the character or anything like that, which might say, oh, here's something over here. It does try, and I've been playing again with one headphone rather than a set of headphones in kind of surround sound, but it does throw up some random encounters that so far have been kind of one of three different things. And you get a lot of these, but it is still one of three different encounters. But they appear as a little blue diamond, and you do have you have a HUD on the screen, but it's not a like, in-game character.
That's not like a Pip-Boy or
it's not like a Dragon Ball power meter or something like that. It's kind of just for you, for the player. But as these things kind of pop up, you do get a sound cue as well. And with some of these ones which happen randomly on the map, you do get kind of more environmental sound cues. So you might suddenly hear in the distance someone shouting for help, and they're stuck on the top of a building and they've injured themselves, and you've got to basically give them one of your med packs or boosters that you get, kind of thing. There's other ones where someone might have been captured by some bandits or some random guys in the city, and you go and kill the other people and free them, and you'll hear them shouting, or you'll hear them saying, please let me go, I've not done anything, and all of this sort of stuff. And I think that there might be some kind of surround sound with this. I would hope that there is, because you get this little kind of sound cue, and then the diamond appears on your compass at the top of the screen.
Right.
And I'm just like spinning around to be like, right, which way is this?
Right.
And
I see what you're saying.
as I turn towards it, the environmental sounds get louder. Again, helping me and assisting me in knowing which way to kind of go towards them. And it'd be interesting to see how much that would affect it if I wasn't playing with the HUD up and having a sort of a compass to know where to kind of direct me to. And it feels like there's a really good game built in this. Like that they've pulled in lots and lots of systems. And stuff like the parkour is very responsive and quite good. It's got a few little moments. The kind of combat system is, again, feels like you're just a guy who's kind of learnt to fight a little bit. It's quite hard in what it's doing, limited in certain ways until you start to become better and, through experience and kind of
Leveling
points
up, I'm
unlock
assuming?
other stuff. Yes, yeah. So there's lots of stuff like technically in this that feels good, but it just feels a bit big and a bit bloated at the moment. Like I say, not feeling like I've made very much progress. I'm kind of popping around the same areas. I'm on one section of the map. There's two big sections of the map, and I'm kind of here, going around in these different areas, sort of thing. But everything feels quite samey with it, and I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot in what I'm doing.
This is the problem that I think they didn't really think about when they were bragging about 500 hours to finish. Everyone's like, "Oh, cool! So it's a grindy game," and then it sounds like you're kind of hitting that conclusion via play.
Yeah, completely. 24 hours in, that's a big chunk of time already to spend, and it's kind of one of those where you think, well, even if it's double that, and it's a 50-hour or 60-hour game, I feel like the story should have pushed on a little bit more than it kind of has done. And I don't feel like I've gone off and done every side quest it's thrown at me, or gone to every random encounter, or raided these shops that you can only kind of go in safely at night because all the zombies have come outside, so there's only a few of them left inside.
I see.
So you can go and get crafting elements or more powerful weapons and those sorts of things. It just feels big and bloated. It's definitely one that if people love open world games, you will get a lot out of this because there is a lot to do.
I was just gonna ask, like, the big complaint of the past, like, especially 5 years, I would say, is like basically post Breath of the Wild open world as a formula has been very formulaic, and that game showed how you could be different, and it showed how you could have a more living feeling world. And like, sure, it's Zelda, and so empty fields with goblins and not much else, and like the setting allows for expecting less. So I think making with the change, like how dynamic that world is and how dynamic it feels, are very different, and it feels so dynamic despite being very empty in a way that like anything with an urban setting can't get away with.
I'd agree. It's so built up and full as well, in terms of its place. I know I spoke about kind of place previously when we were talking about submerged hidden depths last week, and this again feels like it's in a place. It definitely exists, and you're moving around an environment. And I think they've made it in a way that, again, it could be anywhere. It's kind of old town, European, overgrown. There's trees growing on roofs, which I'm not sure would actually happen in a 15-year period.
15? No.
Yeah. So there's lots of stuff where they've kind of gone, right, we're sort of set in anywhere Europe, and we've decided that our kind of post-apocalyptic environment is going to be a bit more overgrown, but still have little kind of best described like as sort of ramshackle buildings, where people with clearly absolutely no builders survived this zombie apocalypse. No architects survived this zombie apocalypse. It is just...
Sorry to hear that, Ben.
Yeah, well, I'm gone. We were one of the first. That's how it started. Targeted all the architects. It feels like everything is kind of makeshift and put together by the inhabitants that are within the city, which in itself is place building.
Yeah.
The idea that everyone is just trying to get by sort of doing what they can. Yeah, great. But it's the same few buildings everywhere. And they obviously just shipped the same 4 guys who built this one and went, can you go and build another one just over there, please? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And they went over there in the world, and it took them another couple of months to build their little ramshackle. They went, we did it like this over there, let's do it like this here again. Rather than utilising different ways that structures could kind of exist on top of buildings and things. There's a little bit of variation. But everything the world, the environments, the enemies, the quests, the side quests, the random things that you can do in the world. Everything feels very samey. And it's not, it's not like an immersive sim where there's 5 or 6 different ways that you could go about doing something. It is a run over here, do a load of parkour through this bit, kill some things, now run away, do a load of parkour to get out of there, kind of thing. There's been moments which I've really liked. One quest had me going down into a car park, an underground car park, to I can't remember what I had to find some goods. Someone had been tipped off that it hadn't been raided, so there must be some good stuff down there. And it was quite a scary encounter, very limited light. Some of the enemies were a little bit harder and would alert others, so suddenly you could be sort of swarmed with them. So you're trying to do things maybe that little bit sort of stealthily. But it wasn't difficult enough for me to go, okay, I'm going to do it stealthily. It's that kind of that meme where it's like, use stealth here, and I just pulled my bazooka out and decided to blow everybody up. But again, I can craft Molotovs. I just chucked a couple of them. The thingy screamed and brought some more. Chucked another couple of Molotovs, and then just finished off the last of them that were there. Moved through the next level, took out a couple of other ones, moved to the next one. It was only 5, so I'm just like, right, cool. I can hack away at you guys, absolutely no problem. And moved into it. But at least the setting, and when you get into it at first, it kind of felt scary. It didn't quite deliver on that initial feeling that they built through a very good set of small corridor environments that you took to get kind of down to it. So yeah, it's there's some little bits in here. There's some little gems of cool sort of quests, and there's a lot of good in terms of the kind of the technical side of things. But they just haven't utilised it very well. A bit of parkour, bit of combat, stuff feels okay, and then they've just gone, yeah, but just do it to go over here and kind of do this. We're not going to give you a huge amount of kind of variation in what's happening. That might change. There's a little bit of a overarching kind of city strategy type game where you unlock, I think it was a water tower at first, and then you can decide which faction gets to live in that zone or run that zone. And by doing so, you unlock kind of like a perk. So I picked the survivors first, and in that zone, it's now covered with, or the zones that the survivors inhabit, it's covered with zip lines everywhere now. So it's a bit easier for me to kind of get between rooftops. And I think that, that grades up. So all of your parkour kind of abilities will be enhanced as such.
Right.
As I do this, or the city will be enhanced to make more use of my parkour abilities. Whereas I think if I'd have gone with the PKs, it's more about combat and fighting. Right. And it's kind of, it's like, you could do parkour, you could do combat, but in most cases, you're doing both anyway. You're parkouring to the combat, and then doing a few parkour moves during the combat, and then going away again.
But the skills are tied to the faction?
Not the skills, just sort of one kind of upgrade almost. So there's like one city upgrade. I know on the PK side of things, the kind of the one they use to sort of advertise why you would go over to the PK side. They have lots of traps in the world. So if you're being chased by hordes of sort of zombies, you can run past a car and set off like a bomb in the car that's been placed there already. Or they've got some big spiked wheel things that are sort of set up that can kind of come down and garrote everything or crush everything as you run under it and tap it, and it will just sweep through and kill everything. So that's kind of the difference. Your skills are tied. Again, your skills are tied, actually, saying that, to parkour and to combat. So the more experience you get in parkour, the quicker that your parkour skills will unlock, and the more you combat experience, the more you'll unlock your combat things. But yeah, it's just kind of a bit, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. It's a game. It's a competent game. It just needs to trim that bloat. This could have been a fantastic, 30-hour game instead. Right. Get rid of everything. Get rid of kind of just leave it in this small open world, And I know that with Dying Light, I think it's been about 7 years between the two games. But with Dying Light, they threw out tons of DLC, tons of extra bits, tons of updates, paid and free. And that game was absolutely huge at the end. And I think they've just kind of gone, well, we've got to deliver something similar. How do we do that? Well, we just make a fucking massive world, and the two things that you can do in the world, you just have to do 4,000 times.
Yeah, I call that the Just Cause 4 problem. 'Cause Just Cause 2 was fantastic, and 3 iterated well on it, and was a little big, but you had such interesting ways to travel, it was okay. And then 4 was just ginormous, and it was like, okay, but there's nothing to do on this map. And like, yes, you can like, do the parachute zip line perpetual flight thing, but that still takes some time. And then then they're like, we'll just give you access to like get vehicles quicker. It's like, no, I don't. Missed something here.
Dying Light 2's got parachute in it as well at some point, or a glider or something similar. The
From
same
what
as
I understand,
Horizon. Gliders everywhere.
Yeah. From what I understand, one of the complaints, I think it was on the besties, they were commenting that parkour feels really good, but by the end of the game, you've got better ways to travel, so you stop doing it.
Yeah, I can
absolutely,
I can see that.
That's like the selling point of it. Well, that's like one of the differentiating points of your series. So why are you end game getting rid of it?
Absolutely, it'd be like Mirror's Edge 2. Had come out and gone, hey, you can do here's the first hour. You parkour around, it's more Mirror's Edge, and then gone, oh no, you can just teleport yourself wherever you want. Don't worry about it. Just don't even run through the city anymore. Just
really?
blink. No, it didn't do that. I'm saying it would be very.
If it did.
If it did, it's that kind of thing. It's like, hey, all of this stuff that you've got very good at and upgraded all of your skills in, and you can now launch off of. Can jump over an item and launch off of it for a longer sort of leap, or double jump. I don't know whether you can double jump, but you can jump a little bit higher, and you've increased your stamina, so you can climb for that little bit longer, and then just go. Don't worry about it. Here's a glider. You can go to the top, the highest point you like, just glide all the way down as much as you want.
Like, spend a half a game developing your knife skills, and then they give you a gun with unlimited ammo.
Interestingly, this game doesn't have any guns.
Yeah, I think that it's not one of the selling points. Like, you can like specialize in like one-handed or two-handed weapons.
I don't know whether you can.
Or at least maybe specialize is a loose term.
Yeah, you can definitely enhance. Using certain weapons, they've got a gear system as well. So you've got a head, hands, feet, trousers, and top kind of items that you pick up, and each of those has a kind of almost a class assigned to them. So like a healer, which means that you can heal yourself better, or bandages work a little bit better. There's a brawler, which I think increases one-handed weapons. There's a tank, which increases two-handed weapons, makes you a little bit tougher. There's I don't know whether they call it marksman, hunter, archer. It's an arrow, basically, which increases your sort of like ranged weapons. And I've seen some stuff where there's bows, crossbows, those kinds of things, but I haven't come across those yet. So there's still a lot of stuff to kind of uncover. This glider, proper ranged weapons in terms of sort of like bows and things, and probably another like 40 hours of story that I just don't feel that compelled to get through, especially now Horizon's turned up at the door.
I was going to ask.
Almost a week later than it should, because the storm stopped all of the postmen from being able to go out and deliver post. So it arrived yesterday, and I put it in, I've updated it, I've installed it, but I haven't had a chance to even start it yet. So who knows when I'll even, when I'll get to that. Considering the buzz around Elden Ring, a game which was kind of on my, I'll get to it at some point, as I had done with the kind of previous Dark Souls games.
Do you ever play Sekiro?
No, so Sekiro I haven't played. It's one where I always take a look at it on sort of like Steam sales and think, oh, should I get it now? Should I buy it now? And then just always leave it. Just never think, well, I've got some time to play Sekiro, I'll do that now. It's always one that's kind of just gone from memory quite quickly for me.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I haven't. I've. Elden Ring is like a From Software game that I'm tempted by as well, mostly because I didn't really give the other ones a chance. Like I had a copy of Bloodborne on. Do I still have them? No, I must have sold it. I think I sold it. Obviously PS4 copy. Because I just had sat on a shelf and like I had Dark Souls or Demon 2 or 3 or something or 1. I don't remember on like a PS Plus or like I got it for free on some sort of system and played less than 20 minutes of, and I was like, oh, I'm not in the mood for this type of game. And then all the hype around Bloodborne, I was like, oh, I should try that. And then I just never did. And like, read a couple of reviews on Elden Ring, which talk about how they've introduced magic mage classes, which mean you can play the game without as much, with it differently, without this like perfecting parrying. You still have to obviously get right patterns and stuff, but it might be less twitchy. And some of the reviews are talking about how the world is really vibrant and like they're saying it in the same senses as Breath of the Wild.
Yes.
And that there are no boundaries, and so you can go anywhere, and there's lots of cool things to find, and you aren't sort of stuck being like, I have to get past this fight ever, really, because there isn't a linear path forced on you. And that's like, oh, cool, because what I really like doing is exploring and fidgeting in worlds and finding things. And if there's a way of seeing if I actually would like to play those Front Software games, but have like I'm not in the mood for that. Don't worry, I can still do something else in this game. That seems like the happy medium that might get me to see if I would like to learn how to, roll around the floor or whatever the good kids do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people have talked about this in the same sort of way, at least with the open world and the feel of how it's evolved from previous games, like they did with Breath of the Wild. And we didn't quite have that same kind of discussion with Horizon Forbidden West. That's very much a game which seems to have come out as Dying Light 2 has, which is the same as the predecessor, and it changes stuff up a little bit, enhances a few sort of things. But Elden Ring seems to at least iterate on the formula, or evolve.
I think it's more evolve, because I feel like, from what I understand, like, there are people who insist that Sekiro is the best From Software game, and some who say, everyone has their champions, but one of the things that they say that is just because it's the iteration of that formula in a sharper way, and it has a bit of an evolution with the dying twice thing, but it's like you need to. Dying twice is like getting the extra life doesn't really do as much as you think. That's like the gimmick of that game. You still need to like be very good and perfect your timing and all that other stuff, right? And that's like Souls games. It's just it is like the epitome of a Souls game, and it's newer and it's less clunky because they've learned things and blah blah blah. While Elden Ring seems like what if we expanded the scope of our Souls game?
Yeah.
I mean, again, by reviews, but that's why I'm excited for it.
And potentially that comes from, the team behind it. This is now I don't know whether you would go back to kind of like Armored Core's kind of gameplay and stuff to say that they were the first Demon Soul, and the systems in that kind of stemmed or came from that. I think it's a little bit too different. But they've had Demon Souls, then Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro. So this is the 3, 4, 5, 6, the 7th game in this kind of play style, which is that much more experienced than, say, Guerrilla and Horizon, or Techland and Dying Light. Yes, they've pumped those games. From Software have pumped those games out over the last 10 years, maybe 12 years, something like that, when the first Demon Soul came out. So they've had a lot of time and a lot of shipped experience with this as well. Techland have had a lot of time in the development of Dying Light and then into Dying Light 2. That's a sort of a 10, 11 year kind of period. But they've only had 2 shipped products to have kind of feedback on and that sort of stuff. Whereas the From Software games have always looked at doing something slightly different. Okay, maybe not so much between Demon's Souls and then Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. But then into Bloodborne, they changed up kind of like the parry system and that sort of stuff. Sekiro, where they changed up kind of how that game gets a little bit more, not even platformy, but I suppose it is a bit more platformy, isn't it, as well, with the idea that you've got the grapple hook and you can sort of move between sort of rooftops and things like that. It's much more sort of Ninja Gaiden than sort of Dark Souls, really. So they've had a lot of experience in shipping stuff and saying, right, cool, what do people like about that? What didn't people like about that? What can we take and move on with next? What ideas do we want to develop and move on to? So I can absolutely see why Elden Ring is just coming out and just hitting all the right notes for lots and lots of people. And I will say, I know as we talked about it earlier, Lucy, if she was here, she would always say, wait a couple of weeks for then those kind of that sheen to drop off of any of these games and the reviews that kind of come out, for people to get their teeth into them and really sort of dig down. And I'd love to see that the reception for Horizon in 2 weeks versus the reception for Elden Ring 2 weeks after its release, and see which one kind of is not rated higher. I always think it's one of those that actually, if you review a game, if you come back to it and you're playing through it again, can that review, your review and your score kind of would change? But would it for any of these kinds of games? With Elden Ring, it seems like it's a much more smaller experience than kind of Dying Light 2 and Horizon. It's not quite as open worldy in terms of, hey, you've got to go and do all these little question mark things. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see in a couple of weeks how people think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely, it's interesting, at least in my neck of the woods of the internet and things. Elden Ring has had like low-key hype, I thought, for a while, but now that it's coming closer, it seems to have like come to a boiling point. While like Horizon, I feel like when it was announced was like, and then it's like everyone just stopped caring.
Yeah.
Or even before it came out, it's like, oh yeah, Horizon's coming out next week, or in a month or whatever, and it was like, oh yeah, that sequel I knew was coming around now, but I mean that on like my social media feeds. A couple of people mentioned it, like, oh yeah, I might play that, but like, there wasn't a like, it's coming out next week. Oh, I'm so stoked! Like that like hype just wasn't there for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. It's just I find that interesting when a sequel, when it's announced, is like super peaky. But I think maybe it is just like the little information we got beforehand didn't say anything. I think I didn't know it would be more of the same. It wasn't like we knew too much, but we definitely didn't know it have any inkling that it wouldn't be.
No, and they very much and very cleverly, I think, in the marketing, at least with Horizon, PlayStation have learned something in terms of not giving the game away too quickly. And we've had a couple of kind of like state of play stuff and a few little blog posts and then a couple of trailers and things, but they very much focused on those additions, right? The glider that Aloy has, the kind of the change to the sort of the climbing mechanic, a few of the changes to sort of the combat system. That's what we've seen kind of in the build-up. So it's been limited. It's been very small little drips of information. For then everyone, I suppose we should have seen it and gone, cool, they've only told us this little bit. It's the same game with just these few changes, right? I know from listening to Waypoint a couple of weeks ago, last week maybe, that they were chatting about Horizon and sort of were saying, again, it's another big empty sort of world. There's lots to do in it, which is all very samey again, but it's a big empty world which has these robot dinosaurs kind of walking around. And one of the issues was that you can kind of and have to observe the dinosaurs to then say, cool, I know their patterns, I know where I can, they're kind of like critical points on their body where I can kind of take armor off of them, which weapons I need to use for that sort of stuff. But they basically have a set kind of path almost around this area, or they're ring fenced in, at least in kind of an area. It's not like, and this is kind of what I wanted from Horizon, like an ecosystem, right? That you have all of these robot dinosaurs kind of living within this ecosystem that don't necessarily rely on each other for sort of like the food chain and stuff like that, but at least can butt heads for territory and who eats the best grass or leaves or humans or other mammals or whatever else kind of exists in the world for them to kind of consume. But this kind of, this ecosystem where everything kind of relies on everything else to live and work, and there's proper patterns, like migratory patterns for these kinds of robots and this sort of stuff. And maybe that's getting a little bit too expectant and very easy for them to say, well, they're robots, so they don't have the same kind of, it's not AI which has learned as human, as animals, so they don't have the same kind of needs and wouldn't act similarly. These things live here and they eat the grass, or they eat the little rodents that kind of live around this area, and that's where they stay. Very easy to write that out, but it feels like they should have done something like that. That would have been the next stage for at least the world for Horizon.
Right.
Yeah. A game I haven't played yet. I can't criticise it that much because I haven't even turned it on. So we shall see. I shall have thoughts on Horizon at some point in the next few weeks, I would imagine. When everyone else is talking about Elden Ring, probably, and not Horizon.
Luckily, we're not a Zeitgeist podcast.
Exactly. Stick with us and we'll talk. We'll probably talk about Sifu in like 3 or 4 weeks, won't we? When one of us has eventually played it. Other than everyone else who spoke about it weeks and weeks ago now. Cool. I know we've run out. We've basically just chatted about Dying Light 2 and open world games for kind of like 45 minutes. I don't know whether you've managed to sort of play anything. I know your regular first look slot we've pushed to tomorrow, so you can cover a game which for the embargo, which comes out on Thursday instead.
Yeah. No, not really. I've been playing a bit more Loop Hero. I unlocked the Necromancer, which is a nice, interesting. So like, first class is like the warrior. You've got a shield, some armor, one weapon, and like I think a ring slot. You get, as you kill things, they just drop gear. You put it on. Then there's the rogue, which loses a shield and gets 2 weapons, but every kill you get a trophy, and then at the end of the loop, all your trophies cash in for items, and then you can gear up. So you don't gear up at any point in the loop. But every kill gets you a guaranteed piece of gear, basically, which the warrior, sometimes they drop nothing. Okay. Sometimes you just drop tiles or cards or whatever. And that was an interesting balance, and also it's obviously a little more offensive, or you have to like go for evasion stuff. Well, the Necromancer literally has no attack, and you have a book, and you have 2 ring slots and a necklace, and you summon skeletons, and your stats are like summon quality percent. You know what that means, except sometimes it's a skeleton, and sometimes it's like a skeleton with a nice hood and claws, and sometimes it's like a giant mummy, essentially, and that guy seems to have more health, right? Okay. So it's like, okay, so like there must be a die roll going on in the background. Get these things. You also have some gear that gets you summon an extra skeleton, because you default to just 2, and so you basically just have a bar that slowly fills, and if you have space to summon a skeleton when the bar fills, you summon it in each fight, and they tend to get hit first versus you, and you have like a magic shield as well, which refreshes every fight, so you're quite okay so long as you're things aren't out leveling your skeletons. 'Cause as soon as your skeletons die by a couple hits, if you're fighting 4 things, it's like hit skeleton. They all hit you. Then you summon a skeleton. Then that skeleton dies, and they start hitting you again. You're like, I might win this fight, but I'm gonna have almost no health. But it's a definitely interesting and a very different play style. I've also there's a village. You basically all the resources you get per thing. You make different buildings in the village. One of which was like this crypt or whatever that got me the necromancer, and so I've done no reading and refuse to find out what I'm supposed to unlock or what things do. Just like grind out, it's nice because I can alt tab away, but like, edit some photos, watch it loop around. Oh, it's paused or whatever. Click a few times. But again, I stand by what I said with it, and when we chatted about Vampire Survivor, which is it still takes a lot of maintenance. Or at least I know it pause. You can make it pause whenever, but you in the middle of a loop, I don't feel, or like an expedition, like a run. I am not an idle game player in the sense of it feels weird to just let go.
Yeah.
Just let it sit there in the background forever until I need a break. So I'm going back to it a little more often than I'd want, and that's one of the reasons why I've only played it a couple times, because it's one thing to have like a mild distraction for break time. It's another thing that if your mild distraction is making break times.
Nice. But it sounds like it's something that you'll keep coming back to.
Yeah, keep plugging away. Yeah.
Nice, perfect.
I'm looping on Loop Hero.
Yeah. Let's finish there for episode 307. We'll return to the beers. Or maybe we don't need to. Have you got anything further to say on the beer?
The cinnamon has dropped down. I've got this much left, and it's been mostly again trying to forgetting or being like, I said I'd commit to this. So the surge of cinnamon at the front of the taste is mostly gone, just from acclimatization. More of the apple is coming through, and it still then finishes with a bit of like, that's still very cinnamony, and then it leaves my mouth dry and a lingering cinnamon and a bit more beery, appley taste, but not. So this would be a lot easier to finish a pint of, but you still wouldn't necessarily want to. But like if it started here, I'd be a lot happier with the beer, but I still wouldn't ever have it again. And at this point, like, I only brought 1 pint glass up because my housemates have used all the other ones. So when we break between recordings, I'm going to be pouring this, quarter of a pint out and rinsing my glass thoroughly and make sure there's no lingering cinnamon.
It's about the amount that I poured out, I think. When you showed the glass, I very familiar amount. I'm like, that's probably about what I chucked, which is maybe a third of the can, something like that.
I'd say, somewhere between a third and a quarter. Do the maths. Yeah.
No, it's fair.
Yeah.
The Dunkel was similar, and it didn't really do very much as I drank through it. It stayed very similar. Lost that little bit of carbonation that was pushed at the front. It lost that again the more I drank, and it also lost that bit of bitterness. So I've just become a little bit more acclimatized, my palate, to that bitterness, that it wasn't hitting through quite as much on the end, which made it maybe a little bit easier to drink probably for most people, but I liked that little bit of bitterness towards the end. So it kind of just faded a little bit too quickly, I think, for me, both in that initial sort of flavour, but over time as well, losing a lot of what it was pushing through in the first sort of third or half of the can. So yeah, a little bit of a bum note, I suppose, for both of us. But beers, I think we probably wouldn't return to this week, which happens. Which happens sometimes. Yeah. Everybody, listener, viewer, friend, if you have beers that you think we should drink, instead you can get us at TankedUpCast on Twitter, or come over to outoflives.net and comment on the podcast post that is put up there, where you can find both the audio version of the podcast and the video version if you want to see our faces and see the beers that we have been drinking, and that will link you directly to our Out of Lives YouTube page. as well, where you can see things like the game Aadil spoke about last week, his first looks, which went up on YouTube for everybody to go and have a look. What was that game called? Something Sir Bronte?
The Life and Suffering of Sir Bronte. Yeah, so first part of that, first hour or so, went up today, and then the next hour will go up tomorrow, and the podcast will go up the next day. So if you're not on Twitch right now, you will be able to watch both parts.
Nice, perfect. You can get me at Nova_47 if you want to give me your thoughts on Horizon before I launch into the game. I've still got no idea when I'll actually get a chance. Probably not until next week now, maybe. Who knows? And Aadil is
at the Omniarch.
If you want to talk to him about Loop Hero strats, what he should actually be doing, looking for, or whether you're just also having a very chilled, relaxed time with Loop Hero and allowing it to kind of do its thing and explore it as you want to. So that's it for us. That's the beers, that's the games. Thank you everybody for joining us. This has been episode 307, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Ciao.
www.outoflives.net